This is my favorite one, I think, from you over the last few months. You once wanted the life you have. And if you don't like the life you have, you probably won't like the one you want, but don't have either.
Yeah, this one I think about all the time because I think about the life that I have now, and I know that I wanted this life, but I obviously do a lot of thinking about this type of stuff. But the equal opposite of that is that when I was poor, I was pretty happy. I was okay with being poor. And now that I am rich, I'll put quotes on that, degrees, it's about the same. And so then it just goes down to, well, then the richness had nothing to do with the level of contentedness, which means that my wants in past and present and future all go into the bucket of irrelevant in terms of their ability to affect my perception of reality in the present. And so in thinking about that, it makes my wants have less stake today. And so a lot of anxiety that I think a lot of people have is around things that haven't happened yet, either good or bad. Like, I hope this speech goes well, or I hope I get this job promotion. But the reality is that once you get the job promotion, you wanted it, you resettle. And the negative version of this is, and you've probably seen this stuff, but when handicapped people get handicapped, so they have a terrible accident, they get paralyzed or they lose a leg or whatever, there's a dip in their subjective well-being. But after 3 to 6 months, it typically restabilizes, which means that if I didn't get paralyzed, or even if I did get paralyzed, I'd be just about as content as I am right now. It's like whatever is about to happen is probably not as bad as that. And so that's the worst case scenario, which is nothing. So, okay.
Good things aren't as good as you think they are. Bad things aren't as bad as you think they are.
Yeah, life is life.
Well, it's the you've already achieved goals that you said would make you happy. Again, it's the other side of this. And, the fact that we take for granted things that only in recent memory we would have begged to have had the opportunity to have been able to have. And now we're flippant about them. The new car that you thought about and you researched for 18 months and then you finally got it and you just curbed the tires yesterday and you go, all right, whatever. And you're like, you spent all of this time thinking about it. The house that you're going to move into, the marriage that you were going to do, the holiday you were going to take. I told you about this last time. Morgan Housel steps out after this huge big buildup with his kids and his wife, steps out onto the balcony of this holiday that he'd taken. And his first thought was, wow, it would be so good if we could come back here next year. That was like during the process of experiencing the thing, he was thinking about the next thing. And he caught himself and thought, okay, this means that success isn't a goal, a journey, or a destination. When you get it wrong, it's a horizon. Every single step that you take towards it, it runs one step further away.
So during my year off that I took during the year of the sale, when I couldn't really work on the business because you don't want to change anything major when you're going through a sale. But I didn't know if I was going to be owning this business soon. So I basically just had to do nothing because I also had to demonstrate that the team could do it without me. So that's still a sellable asset. So I basically just sat there for a year. And that's when a lot of my thoughts kind of caught up from, when I had started years earlier. And that was when I kind of refined my kind of theory of living for me, which was that hard work is the goal. And so it's not like work hard so that X, because as soon as you have a so that, then the X is the thing. But if the goal is to work as hard as you possibly can, then the only real output we have is who we become along the way. And so in reframing that, then it's something that I can win or measure myself against every day in real time throughout the day, which is how hard am I working? Because that is the goal. And then even I say this just for audio, but everything else takes care of itself, still puts the everything else as the goal still. It's just being vaguer. But if you just say the only point is working hard because I know that whatever I'm going to get is stuff that I will become accustomed to. And the, I guess, opposite of the hedonic treadmill is the resilience piece is that my ability to work hard itself is growable. And so I just need to keep my RP, my rate of perceived exertion, at 8 or 9 or 10, because I know that when I look back on my life, the days that I loved the most were days when I had nothing left in the tank. And there's this thing that Jesse Itzler has this, and I love it. I hate him for having it because it's so fucking good. But he taught it to his kids, which is they have a little zero, means that there's nothing left in the tank. And when they finish a race or they do whatever, it's like, did you leave anything in the tank? And I thought about that, and the best days of my life were ones when I had nothing left in the tank. And so then the goal becomes to empty the tank, not where I drive, but just to drive the car as hard as I possibly can. And that means that in the beginning, it's just straightaways and just seeing how high I can rev the engine. But as I become more advanced, it's like, all right, well, now we've got turns, and then it's turns in elevation, and then it's turns in elevation without guardrails because we have risk. And so when I think about how hard I want to work, the interesting thing about that is that the only person who can judge you on your success is you, because you're the only one who knows how much left in the tank you really had. And the better you get, and you can resonate with this, you start winning exteriorly. And that's when people are like, it felt so empty. It's because they didn't actually work as hard as they could have. They just worked hard enough to beat everyone else. But that discrepancy between how hard you could have worked to work your hardest versus what was required in order to win, to me, that's the opportunity that shifting towards the work being the goal unlocks for you. And I work harder now than I did when I was poor. And I think it's because I've learned to enjoy it.
How do you ensure that the hard work focus doesn't detach you from outcomes and inputs? This seems like there's a little bit of a tension with what we started talking about in the beginning. So
totally.
It's direction over speed is the first one, but we're now talking about maximizing for speed.
Yeah.
So how do we balance direction and speed?
So with the question, if the outcome that we're trying to have is being present, then the outcome actually is irrelevant because it's about how much you empty the tank. If we're talking about the science of achievement, then the outcome does matter, obviously. And so balancing both of those things, which is that if I want to accomplish all my goals, then I need to make sure that my inputs are tied as closely as humanly possible to the outcome. If I want to be satisfied, it doesn't matter at all. And so I think it's marrying those two ideas where the perfect world, in my opinion, would be you work as hard as you possibly can because you thought ahead of time, what is the input that has the closest correlation with the outcome that I want? And then you put your blinders on and you start digging. If you're a beginner, just figuring out how to make your first dollar, I'm a co-owner of Skool.com, Skool.com. You can start for free. It's a cool setup that we have to help people do it. And right now, 54.1% of people who start a paid community on Skool make money. So we have put a tremendous amount of effort, Sam and I, into trying to remove all barriers and all friction for people who are getting started so that they have literally no excuses.
It's a way better strike rate than OnlyFans.
I don't know what their strike rate is, but we've worked really hard if you saw the amount of detail, I mean, maybe you heard some of this from the podcast, but the amount of detail that went into like where buttons go and what things we remove was actually a big one, was how can we so pare this down so that people don't get overwhelmed? Because the number one reason people cancel or decide not to do something is overwhelm. And so we're like, okay, how can we funnel action into the clearest possible steps that people go step 1, step 2, step 3, and then all of a sudden they're like, oh, this actually worked. And so it's been really cool to see the thousands of people who have made their first dollar, which is what I make all my content about it to begin with. And so it's been the ride of my life. It's been awesome.
Okay, I appreciate you, man.